Hello everyone. Today I want to share with you a video about believing your opponent's threats. We've all been in a situation, if we played chess long enough, that uh, it seems that our opponent has an overwhelming position and our opponent is moving confidently, quickly, perhaps even walking away from the board or showing a lack of interest in the game. And we're thinking in our own minds, wow, this guy must have everything figured out. And, we create a self fulfilling prophecy in that our play becomes inferior and our resistance, uh, isn't as good as it should be because we believe in, the position of our opponent. And that's what this game is about. It's a little bit of chess psychology here. And I have the board flipped around because we're going to focus on the defense on the other side of the board. So this game is from Bern 1925. The white player is Alexander Alekhine, right? This is 2 years before he won the world championship from Capablanca, but he is in his prime at this point. And the player with the black pieces is Walter Michel. So let's get right into it. Alekhine started out with his favorite d4, and Michel played knight f6, a modern conception, c4, e6. Now we have the option to go into the Nimzo Indian or Benoni, Queen's Indian, or Queen's Gambit decline. And that's why I love this move order. Knight f6 and e6, knight c3, and if you don't like going into the Nimzo with bishop b4, you can play d5, or if you want, you can play c5, going into a Benoni. Michel opts for d5, and we get a regular Queen's Gambit decline here after these moves. Okay, so bishop d3, castle, castle, and we're off to the races. Now here, Michel opts for this move a6, and Alekhine decides to play a4. C5 could be played here, and you see that in a lot of these Slav variations with the early a6, and exploiting this backward b pawn as well as the newly weakened b6 square. Also, c takes d5 is possible, right? Just setting the pawn structure, defining the pawn structure. A move like rook c1, very solid. Alekhine opted for the move a4, which restricts b5 altogether. Perhaps black had the plan of playing d takes c4, bishop c4, and b5 followed by c5. So Alekhine nips that in the butt. Now h6 is played, questioning the bishop. Bishop drops back to h4, and Michel plays d takes c4, b takes c4. Now, I just wanted to make mention about this particular position. Notice the lack of space on black's side. He's very solid, but it's pretty much cramped. He only has 3 ranks. He occupies 3 ranks, where white occupies 4 ranks. So although his position is very solid, he needs to trade some pieces so that he can have a bit more mobility. Right now, his pieces are kind of in the way of each other. Notice the knight on d7 and blocking in the bishop on c8, and then in turn the rook on a8 is hard to develop. So black's position is very strong like a fortress, but just has too many pieces in that small amount of space. So that is one of black's strategies, is to try to deal with that problem. Another thing I would like to mention is that the structure of black, the pawn structure that is known as the Yaroslav structure. I've mentioned this on other videos, and it's very important to understand structures in chess because many openings will feature the same structures. So if you understand the structures in general, it's easy to um, learn or play the different openings. Now, I'm going to show you some things real quick um, to demonstrate what I'm speaking about. Now, keep this black formation pawn structure in mind, and then go back. So it's called the Carroll-Slav structure because this is the structure you see in the Slav defense and Carroll-Klein. But you also see it in other openings. Your Alekhine defense has the same structure that arises, and of course, Queen's Gambit declined, semi-Slav, Scandinavian. So let's look real quick. So here's an example, the Carroll-Klein. Let's run through that real quick. Notice the pawn structure. Black occupies the 3 ranks. Again, he's very solid, but he just lacks space. Some players, patient players can deal with that. Nothing wrong with that. Here's an example. Some players like to play this, the Scandinavian, and just note black's pawn structure. Same deal. And here again, Alekhine's defense. And this happens to be the modern variation. Again, notice the similarities in pawn structure. Same deal. Different openings, same deal. Alright, let's go back. So, this is back to the game. Alekhine has just played bishop takes c4. The final thing I would like to mention about this position is that it's very important for black to achieve one of 2 breaks in order to free his cramped position. One is c5, right, which you see a lot if you play Queen's Gambit declined and Slav and things like that. You're always trying to break with c5, and the other is e5. Now, if you had your choice, you probably would love to get e5, but e5 is usually harder to get in. So you see c5 mostly. And you can see why, because the knight is normally on this f3 square. And with conjunction with this pawn, it's usually more difficult to get in this break, e5. So therefore you see c5 in many of the queen's pawn openings. And this is what, along with trading some pieces off, this is what gives black the opportunity to, to breathe a little bit in the position here. So I just want to give you a little example of what I'm talking about with these breaks here. So let's look at I don't know, let's like a position from the semi-Slav. So for instance, d4, d5, c4, c6. Let's take knight c3, e6, and let's go with that e4, d takes, knight takes. There's our semi-Slav again. I'm sorry, our Carroll-Slav structure. Bishop b4, bishop d2, queen takes, knight a6, bishop d6, and there's e5. And this position holds up for black. But notice with the e5, and that's why I showed it to you, I just wanted you to see an example of e5, because black now occupies 4 ranks. And notice this problem bishop is now free. So even though white has a slight lead in development, practice has shown that black can successfully play and maintain this position. So that's one time you can see e5 in the position. And I'll just go through this real quick. Here's another example. So D takes C4, and this is more like of a mainline thing that you'll see. So bishop F5, knight E5 with the idea of capturing this pawn, but also playing F3 and E4. This is like your main kind of Slav. E6, again, notice the formation of the pawns. F3, bishop B4, knight takes C4, castle, bishop G5, H6, bishop H4, and C5. So you see what I'm talking about. See, the break allows black to liberate the position, and then the line goes D takes C5, and then queen D1, rook D1, etc. And you can see how C5 and E5 breaks are very important, because now it looks like black has a little bit of freedom and he's on his way to equality. So thanks for participating in that little digression, and I hope it increases your understanding of the structure. Okay, let's get back to the game now, because again we're talking about believing, right, in your opponent's moves. We're talking about a psychological handicap, you know, and that's what's great about humans playing chess as opposed to engines, is there's that psychological factor, you know, body language and attitude, that all plays into it, fatigue, different factors like that. Okay, H6. Okay, we're back here. So Michel opted for knight to D5. So he wants to trade some pieces off, right? Just like I said. Now here, he could have went for the break here, C5. You see, there's nothing wrong with that, and black is just fine. Instead, he goes for this and plays knight D5. Now Alekhine opts for bishop G3. He doesn't really want to trade pieces. He wants black to suffer with the cramped position, and he doesn't really mind if black trades pieces in this way. If he takes the knight on C3, because then he just fortifies the center. Going on, so A5 is played, and this is one of the downsides of white playing A4, is that this square can be exploited many times. Queen E2, and this is just simply preparing E4, but also preparing to bring a rook on the D file in opposition to the queen. Knight B4, there it is, rook A D1, and knight F6. So black, although he hasn't been able to trade pieces, at least he's been able to find some places to put his pieces. So he has this B4 square, and the knight is you know, has some influence on the D3 and C2 squares, so that knight is not too bad. Now, however, without that knight being on D7 or C6, Alekhine can jump in to the E5 square, moving the knight up the board. So again, black is very solid, but the position is starting to look a little intimidating here. E4 is on the table, right, for white. And again, where is black's counterplay in the position? So it starts, you know, start getting a little uncomfortable at this point. You know, I'm solid, but where's my counterplay? And it looks like white's position is more clear and easier to play. He has the bishop on C4, knight on E6, so you already got to look out for sacrifices on F7 and G6, you know, the light squares. You got to watch out for E6. E4 is intimidating, you know, F4. So it seems like white has a lot of possibilities where black's is kind of limited. Queen b6 is played. So he gets out of opposition from the rook on d1. Queen b6. Now Alekhine plays e4. Okay. Rook d8. So now we see a double attack here on the d4 pawn. So good move right here. Bishop f4 by Alekhine. Do you understand this move? You say, hey, why didn't he protect the pawn? The idea behind bishop f4 is that if, oh, sorry about that. The idea behind bishop f4 is that if rook takes d4, then bishop e3, skewering the rook against the queen on b6. Michel played bishop d7. Again, and I keep saying this over and over because it's very important. Black is solid here, but very passive. And in chess, if you like too passive, sometimes you get your position overran because the other player with the space, the very fact that he has more space means that he has more options to place his pieces. So therefore, he has the optimal location. So his pieces might not be optimally placed, but if you give him 4 or 5 more moves, then he can place his pieces optimally or in the best positions. You see? So it's kind of like if you owned a whole lot of property, right? You owned a whole lot of land. You got so many more options of what you can do with that property as far as like building it up, and making changes and such. If you only own the room, then you're very limited, And so black has to be very careful at this stage. So Michel played bishop d7, right? It's not a losing move, but it's kind of like, what else would you do here? And then it's questionable if that bishop is improved from where it was. But to give Michel credit here, he understands that the storm is coming. So the idea of bishop d7 is to move the bishop from c8 to f8 and guard on the king side. So again, that's like the first step in the psychology of this game, is that he's already believing in his opponent already, because he's playing defensively now. See, his mindset is defensively. His mindset is, I have a solid position and I have to hold. So so already he's kind of out of the attacking possibility or counter shots. Looking for counter shots. He playing moves like bishop d7 to go to e8. So that's the first step. Is mentally like, man, this guy's building up a big position. He has a center. I have to defend. So let's look back at rook takes d4 again, because the center is very important. If black can destroy the white center, I mean, he's halfway there. I mean, he's pretty much liberating himself. So rook takes d4, bishop e3, bishop c5, bishop takes d4, bishop takes d4, challenging the knight on e5. The knight comes back. Now e5 is playable. Also, bishop c5 is interesting also, but bishop stays there and e5 is played, and even though black is down the exchange, he's achieved the e5 break, and he has some potential play here. For instance, if knight takes d4, right, just trying to get rid of the bishop here, e takes d4, and then the c3 knight kind of has nowhere to go. Right, goes back home, and then in this position, black has a phenomenal move, d3. Well, what's the big deal about d3? Well, the main idea is that this pawn on f2 is pinned, right, because of queen on b6. So after d3, if bishop takes d3, then simply bishop g4, and black will win back the exchange, and then some. So you see, just like that, black is able to turn the game around. So instead of taking that knight, the bishop has to be allowed to stay there for a couple of more moves, and then perhaps a move like h3, preventing this idea in the first place. But then black can play moves like c5, right? And this bishop is very, very strong, right? And notice the closed nature of the position, and the rooks are not, and the rooks are not as effective in that position. But I'm not saying this is winning for black or anything. I'm saying that the mentality of black being on the defensive prevents these type of moves from being made. And to me, I would rather play this position than the cramped position that actually was played. I'd rather have that going than this right here. Okay, so bishop d7 was played. Bishop d2 by Alekhine. Why bishop d2 now? Again, notice the pawn here is just left on prise by Alekhine. The reason why he played bishop d2 is he wants to play f4. He's ready to smoke black right now. Now, do you think that Michel took the pawn on d4? Or did he believe in his illustrious opponent? You got to think. It's kind of like if you had the chance to, play, because you figure Alekhine is probably, number 2 or 3 in the world at the time, right? Because you had Capablanca as champion, and you had like Nimzovich and, Alekhine. So it's kind of like if, you were at a tournament and then all of a sudden you're sitting down and you're playing Sergei Karyakin, So you'll try to play your game, but there's a lot of psychological elements, because you're thinking, man, this guy sees everything. So this guy might have been going through the same thing. So bishop d2, right? And this pawn is, just hanging there. The central pawn, getting rid of the central pawn is very important. And there's a tempo here because after queen takes, this knight is attacked. So it's not like the queen, it's not like he could play a move like bishop d3 or something like that. And then if he plays bishop f4, right, then the queen can just tuck herself back here somewhere. Maybe queen b6, right, just stole a pawn. Right, so that leaves us with this move. Again, right, queen takes d6, you have this move, and queen c7. And this is better for black. Not that black is better, I'm saying this scenario is better for black because he's traded the h pawn for this d pawn in the center. So that's a net positive for black there. Again, you're not going to find those moves if you're not looking for counter chances. If you start believing in your opponent's position, you're not going to play a move like that. And I could tell that the opponent believes in Alekhine right here. He's like, I can't take that pawn. Alekhine wouldn't have let that pawn just hang like that. There must be some trick. Instead of analyzing and deciding, man, I can take that. He said there must be a trick. So he played queen c7. Again, remaining passive, defensive minded. So there comes f4. And remember what I was telling you, the importance of the break, e5 and c5. Now obviously e5 can't be accomplished. However, you got to consider c5. Again, the pawn is still unprotected. c5, and the main line you got to think of is d5. Can I play d5? Because this is white's biggest asset, is this conglomerate in the center. So if you can destroy that, you free your game. It might even come out on top. Finally, bishop e8 was played. Remember I told you that that was his plan, to try to fortify f7 and defend himself on the queen side. But c5, again looking for counter chances instead of just playing purely defensive. c5, and of course not c takes d5, because that would just break down a white center. This is what black wants. So d5 is critical. So let's break it down, right? So he gets the advance in, and after e takes, right? First, let's look at e takes. Okay, now you have this isolated pawn, and now you play a killer move like bishop d6. And notice how this pawn blocks off the lines right here. Knight b5, not a problem. Bishop takes, a takes, and now rook e8 with the threat to win a pawn. Bishop c3, rook a d8, and this is just a sample line, folks. Queen f3, and we can see the counter chances by black. Right, black is fighting here. He's not just accepting his fate. And then black can play a nice move like knight c2 here, with the idea of coming to d4. And the game is just up for grabs. Black is super solid, and white's position is starting to look loose. Because if he doesn't have the attack here, and this goes into some type of endgame, black will have the advantage. So again, looking at c5, d5, e takes d5, and let's say he hops in with the piece instead of taking with the pawn. Right? Remember what I said, black wants to trade pieces here. So if bishop takes, then just knight takes. Right? This is what these piece trades are better for black. So if knight f takes d5, e takes, and then we have a variation analogous to what I just showed you. And bishop d6 will happen. And this is why in the beginning, when I first showed you, d5, e takes d5, I showed you the line with e takes d5 because white doesn't really want to trade. It's black that wants to do the trading here. Okay, so there's another opportunity that was missed. Again, the passive bishop e8 was played. f5. Again, this pawn, excuse me, d4, the d4 pawn is just left on prise. However, this looks pretty fearful. I mean, Alekhine, right? High-ranking player. I mean, look at all the pressure here on the light squares. So what do you play here? Well, you have to calculate. You have to sit down and calculate. You have to discipline yourself. But you have to understand that the major issue in the position is the center, right? The center. So don't be intimidated, and you have to walk yourself through. Now you want to take on d4, so you have to be able to convince yourself that it cannot be done. However, if you believe your opponent, then you're going to do exactly what he wants you to do. Now, bear with me here. Michel played e takes f5 here, right? So e takes f5, which wasn't bad. But he has to be careful of f7. Rook takes f5. Now again, notice d4 is still on prise. So I want to go back. So first of all, after f5, let's look at rook takes d4. And let's look at the obvious. First of all, just take a minute and look after rook d4. Notice this knight is no longer protected. The d4 pawn was protecting that knight. So when you're analyzing these candidate moves here, rook takes d4, understand that F takes E6 is really not that good here because the knight protection of the knight has to be dealt with. So when I was analyzing the position, one of the first moves I thought of was bishop F4 with the idea of, some type of discovery against the queen. But on bishop F4, notice the rooks can be traded now. Again, black is trying to alleviate the tension in the position. So for instance, at the bishop F4 trade, rook takes, knight takes. There's a couple of ways to take, but say knight takes. And now, again, not believing your opponent, right? We don't believe in this, right? We're the black player right now. We're not believing in none of this. We're looking, how can we counterattack? Remember your basic chess tactics. Double attack. He played bishop d6. See, now something else he got to deal with. Like, how does he overcome this? Right? I mean, he could play f takes here. Right? So knight d3, again, we want to trade. Knight takes. That forces bishop takes, more trades. You see? All this stuff is forced. Queen takes, bishop takes. Rook takes. E5, excellent move. Why E5? Well, the opponent has a light square bishop, right? We don't want to capture here because when capturing, that alleviates one of his pawns, which could be potentially weak, and it opens up the E4 square for him. So we play E5, fixing the pawns here. Now he can't even use that square, and the bishop is blocked. Black is better. Right? So rook takes d4 is definitely important. The other move I had looked at was knight f3, attacking the rook again. Right? Again, this is another example. Do you believe your opponent? Your opponent, and when I say that in this particular example, your opponent is telling you, hey, you got to move that rook. You got to get that rook out of there. So again, you have to analyze. Maybe you could just give up the exchange here. Right? You got to analyze these things. But you definitely, in this type of position, you just definitely don't want to give up a clear tempo and play a move like rook d7 or something like that. Excuse me, rook d8. Like, one of the moves I saw was knight g4. With the idea that, okay, if he plays this, then, I can checkmate him. Right? That's like an idea, and then of course you have to see if it works tactically. Because notice after knight f3 and knight g4, this no longer works because the bishop's not protected anymore. So he really can't take the rook there. So he can just go on with his natural plan. Right? F takes. Right? And now here, it's a good move. Rook takes c4, queen takes c4, queen b6. Right? And so on. And I don't want to get into all the variation. I mean, I looked at this game for a long time. I spent about an hour on this game looking at it. And a lot of it's for my own personal study because soon I'm gonna start playing chess actively again, and I'm gonna be showing you my own games. I'm gonna go in my chess books and show you some of my old games. I feel funny about it sometimes because I don't like to put the names of the people that I might have defeated, masters and such, out there. But it's like I don't want to just put like no name because then it'd be like, oh, this guy didn't really, beat this guy, or whatever, stuff like that. So it's what it is. I'll put wins and losses. That way, be on both ends of the spectrum or whatever. But I have some, like games that I'm, proud of and things like that. But anyway, back to this game. So again, rook takes d4. Just kill a move there. You know, and just like I said, notice the difference between playing passively and believing your opponent, and not, being belligerent. Be belligerent. When your opponent looks like he's, gonna run you off the board, be belligerent. Just resist. Have that mentality. Don't just believe him. And to me, what I see with the black player here is defensive minded. He believes in the position. He's like, wow, look at that center. Look how well the pieces are placed. And he's just kind of like holding on for dear life instead of looking for those counter shots. So F5 was played. He played E takes F5, which was okay, because you got to understand that, Alekhine wasn't playing, all his moves accurately. So you got to look at your opponent as if he's wrong. Like, you have to have that mentality, like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing, so that you can be critical of his moves also. If you just accept this, oh, this guy's a strong player, then you're gonna just think that, okay, everything he does is right, and you're not gonna look for the refutation. You gotta look at the guy as if he, this guy doesn't know what's going on, and that'll help you. So after E takes F5, Alekhine played Rook takes F5 again. Rook takes D4. There's an opportunity here. Like, you have to convince me not to take that. Now the difference here is, when I showed you the last variation, let's look at it again. Rook takes D4. When I showed you the last variation with Rook D4, this Rook wasn't here, so the Knight was actually on pre, so it's easier to find that move. Now the Rook is actually protecting the Knight here. But even still, after Rook takes D4, when I first looked at this position, I saw the idea of Knight takes F7, Bishop takes F7, Bishop takes F7, King here, and then followed by E5. So I was looking at that. So for instance, there's an example, Bishop F4 again, and like I said, it has the same type of idea. We're gonna trade some pieces. Rook takes, Queen takes, Rook D1. This is all good for black. Queen F3, Queen B6. Check. Just getting out of the path of this guy. And Bishop E3, Bishop C5, and so on. Takes, check, and Queen D6, getting back in time to protect the king. Again, Rook takes D4, Rook DF1. Right, common motif, doubling up. And B5, A takes B5, C takes B5. Just trying to distract the bishop. And you have a fighting double-edged game. Like, I'm not trying to tell you, white is better or black is better. The game is dynamically equal. But I'm showing you the variation so that you can see the difference. And somebody has a fighting mentality in a certain position is somebody that's passive. So you can see by the selection of moves that this player was just feeling kind of, like resigned to his fate, so to speak. So after Rook takes F5, you think he played Rook takes D4? No. The guy played Bishop F8, which is super, super defensive. Again, you can see he's just trying to guard his dark squares. He's worried about this bishop sack right here. Again, I'll show you. After Rook T4, you got to analyze the bishop sack, right? Rook takes D4. Let's say Bishop takes H6. Again, I already showed you this line. Rook takes D1, Knight back, G takes. Then what? See, this is when you stare at the opponent across the board. Then what? Okay, the G file's open. What you gonna do with it? Queen E3, for instance. Just step aside with the king. You have to be able to make moves like that. Bishop takes F7, and then Rook D8, attacking the knight. And White's attack is done. He's lost. You just can't make an egregious blunder, but there's no legitimate way that he can attack you. Again, the opponent is afraid now to play Bishop F8. Now, here's an interesting point in the game. Now, here's Alekhine, great tactician. He's been building up this killer position. He has h6, right? But now there's a reverse psychology going on here. Alekhine believes his opponent. So Alekhine, who wants to play the move bishop h6, right? Bishop takes h6. His opponent plays bishop f8, and Alekhine says, okay, bishop f8 is designed to protect against the potential bishop h6. And so Alekhine believes his opponent. But and so it's hilarious because bishop takes h6 is so obvious because after pawn takes h6, the knight on f6 is just hanging. Remember, this bishop was helping to protect the f6 knight. So after bishop f8, right, bishop takes h6, g takes h6, who's protecting the knight? Just simply rook takes f6 and the king side is busted open. Right? And nobody's worried about that move. Again, we don't believe our opponent here because there's too many pieces attacking f7. We would just take bishop takes f7 or knight takes f7. So even the great Alekhine for a victim, right? And Alekhine played rook d f1. Right? Instead of just playing a winning move, bishop takes h6, he plays rook d f1, which gives black another chance. Right? Now here, black has a chance again. Notice the d4 pawn's been hanging there the whole game. Rook d4. But this time it's not as effective because there's no, after bishop e3, there's no trade available. Remember how this rook was here that whole time? And then black would always have that trade on rook d1. Here he doesn't. So now he just has to lose a tempo. He goes back. But then that motif I mentioned to you earlier with e5 happens. Knight takes, bishop takes f7. And then there's e5 coming. And we see the idea of pawn attacking. Right? So sometimes you miss those opportunities early, they're not there later, and that's an example. So after rook df1, black misses his final opportunity, which probably is a move like that. Knight c2, by the way, is threatening to come here and play d4. So for instance, after queen f2, knight takes d4. And the position gets super, super sharp here. Rook takes, g takes, knight g4, and only the computer can help you kind of get out of a position like this. Is black. Maybe queen d6. It's just it's brutal. So you might be able to survive the initial onslaught, but then end up in a bad ending. So I'll leave that analysis right here and say that white will have a superior ending because I think he survives the initial onslaught. But that was his last chance, is to play knight c2 here. Rook d4 doesn't work this time. So instead, he went and played rook d6. He had all that time to destroy this fortification here, and he didn't do it, and he played rook d6. Again, he's playing in a defensive mindset. He believes his opponent all the way, and his idea is somehow to try to hold on to this piece, but it's not going to happen because, again, and I don't know how Alekhine missed it or why he rejected it, but bishop takes h6 is there again. Same thing, g takes, and look at the knight. Right, same beatdown possibility is on the board. Instead, Alekhine played knight g4 here. Right, so he's giving his opponent chances. It's like he's on the precipice of destroying his opponent, and it's like he lets up. Now here you have this threat of, just playing e5. So the most obvious move here to me, is to play knight takes g4. Now you have to calculate what happens on bishop takes f7 because that's really and crash through with the rooks on the f file. Therefore, again, believe in the opponent. And I know I've repeated this a lot of times, but you're never gonna forget. Dude played, right? Michel played rook d7 again, defensive move to guard the f7 square. It's like, come on, man, right? Right? Stop believing in the opponent. Here again, Alekhine gave him a chance. You got to play this move for better or for worse. Knight takes g4, queen takes g4, take the pawn, rook takes. Why take the pawn? Not because you're pawn grabbing, but you're also attacking this at the same time. Bishop takes f7, bishop takes f7, rook takes f7, and you got to go into this kind of ending right here. Right? Again, white is better, but you still have chances as black. If bishop takes f7 here, excuse me, instead of bishop takes f7, right? That's a tempting move to make. You just simply just take the rook, take the bishop. So again, d5, position, see the position looks devastating. The thing is, in a tactical position like that, it's easy to go wrong. Again, here's a perfect example. How many of you would believe your opponent here and resign? Right? You'd be like, there's no way out of this. Right? Don't believe him. Make him show you. So rook takes c4. Then the opponent says, I'll show you. You play rook g5. Now how are you gonna get out of that? Right? Are you gonna play g6 here? Right? It's a problem with the g6 though. You can't get away with g6. How you gonna roll with g6? Rook takes. Right? Because the problem is after f takes g6, rook takes f8, and you're gonna get mated in short order. Right? It's gonna be over. Right? No way out of that. So the point is fight. Right? So after rook g6, you don't play g6. You play queen b6 check, king h1, and queen d4, and this is winning for black. Notice how he uses the checks to maneuver his queen onto that diagonal. This is winning for black. Right? And now I'm not saying you're gonna find all the moves, but when you fight, there's gonna be a chance that your opponent misses some moves, as Alekhine did here. There's gonna be a chance you miss some moves, but your mentality has to be that you think that guy is wrong, and that you're the one that's correct. You see, don't go into the mentality of you can't, that he has a better position, that his moves are right. Don't believe the opponent. Rook d7 in each game, no matter if you win or lose, each game, don't believe your opponent. Just keep that mentality. Like, this guy is wrong. Even if he proves to be right at the end, going to the next game, man, this guy is wrong. He doesn't know what he's doing. Right? Because it's better to have that mentality, because that'll help you find the counter shots. If you don't have the right mentality, you won't find the counter blows. You'll be playing real defensively all the time. So rook d7 was played, right? We already showed that knight takes g4 is the best chance. So rook d7, and finally Alekhine finds the right move. And there's two moves here. Actually, you can play rook takes f6 or knight takes. It doesn't matter. Alekhine opted for rook takes f6, right? G takes f6 and knight takes f6, and that's going to be made again in short order. There's no stopping queen g4 check from appearing on the scene, right? So all black can try to do is make a move like king h8, but then queen g4 is coming again, and there's really no stop for that. So Walter Michel resigned, and Alekhine went on to win a nice game. So I hope you enjoyed that video. I know it was kind of long, but this is a video that you might want to listen to several times, right? And understand the concept of fighting chess. Even though your opponent might have a quote unquote superior position, right? There's psychological elements, and it's important to remain. It's confident to important to remain confident, right, and believe, right, yourself, trust in yourself at the chessboard, right. Don't believe in your opponent. I like Fischer's approach. See, Fischer used to have like a negative view of the opponent. He used to kind of look down on him. And I'm not saying, telling you what to do personally, but I'm saying at the chessboard. Like when I'm playing somebody at the chessboard, like I'm friendly and everything, but in my mind, I'm like, man, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. I don't care what his rating is. I'm thinking, man, this guy doesn't even know how to play. Like I'm telling myself that, right? So each move that he does, I'm scrutinizing. Man, this move is wrong. This move is a blunder. This move is this move is crazy. Even though it might be a good move. See, I never allow myself to give him credit. Like I want to be like, wow, that was a good move. See, because that's the slope. You start, get on that slippery slope of believing the opponent, right? So now when he does his next move, it could be an outright blunder. But you thinking like, wow, okay, that move makes sense because he did this move before and it's the same plan. No, that move can be wrong, right? You be like, man, he left this pawn hanging. I can't take that. He must have. It must be something there. If I do that's right. If I do that, he'll just do this, and then you cut off your analysis, right? But if you thinking, man, this guy doesn't know. This guy doesn't know jack. And you start finding refuge. Yeah, I can grab this pawn because boom, 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 right? Right, and then you'll have more fighting games. Like you might lose, but you're gonna have fights on your hands. Like you won't just get overran like in this position. This position was just like brutal, you know. I mean, he just let Alekhine just overtake the position. I mean, after this move, knight d5, bishop g3, a5. I mean, it was like all defense after that. I mean, pretty much after, yeah, I would say after rook d8 for move 17, is all defense here from black. Bishop d7, queen c7, bishop e8, right? He can capture there. Another defensive move, bishop f8. This is like, oh no, help me, run for cover. Rook d6, defense, rook d7. There's nothing but defense and just getting smashed at the end. So anyway, I know this is a long video. Please like and subscribe. Um, you know, comments appreciated. And I hope you like this chessboard too. Some people are complaining about the different chessboards. I'm just trying different looks, experimenting. So I hear all your comments and read all the comments. I know everybody can't be happy. But anyway, like I said, these videos are for the people, the true chess fans out there that's looking, for understanding. So anyway, I'll see you guys later on the next video.